This is the Ellis Martin Report. Chris Taylor is the chairman and founder of Kodiak Copper Corporation. He's a structural and economic geologist with more than 20 years of industry and research experience with both mid-tier producer and junior exploration companies. He's the founder, CEO, and president of Great Bear Resources, which made a district-scale gold discovery in Canada and was taken over by Kinross Gold for $1.8 billion. He's also a former geologist with Imperial Metals, exploring for copper porphyries in North America. Kodiak Copper trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as KDK.V, and in the U.S. on the OTC as KDKCF. The company's most advanced asset is the 100% owned MPD Copper Gold Porphyry Project in the prolific Quesnel Trough in southern British Columbia, Canada, where Kodiak made a discovery of high-grade mineralization in 2020 at the Gate Zone, which has since been expanded to considerable size. MPD has all the hallmarks of a district-scale multi-centered porphyry system with several targets with similar signatures to the Gate Zone yet to be tested. 2022 saw the discovery of a parallel porphyry trend at the nearby Prime Zone, adding further upside and size potential to the Gate Zone, and the discovery of the Beyer Zone, a new high-grade gold-silver zone. With a lot more potential to be unlocked at MPD, Kodiak is looking forward to continuing its discipline and systematic approach to exploration to generate value for shareholders through discovery success. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with Chris today on the program. Chris, welcome back to the program. It's fantastic to visit with you today.
It's nice to speak with you again, Ellis.
I met Claudia Tornquist, the CEO of Kodiak, about, I would say, a year and a half ago, and we met at an event in Scottsdale, Arizona. I didn't know a lot about Kodiak at the time, but as we got into a conversation about it, and I realized that the team was basically headed by you, and all that success with Great Bear that I missed out on, actually. I was not an investor in the company. I thought, well, I don't want to miss this one. So without even digging any deeper, I invested in your company just because of the success with the Great Bear. I've been a copper bug since I've been a kid, but I haven't been heavily vested in the sector. And I think it's a safe place to be because of where we're going in the critical minerals and critical metals world. Even though copper hasn't been designated as such, it should be. But let me ask you, after having all this great success with Great Bear, why did you get involved in a project in southern BC, copper specifically?
That's a good question, Ellis. I guess on the commodity side, Kodiak used to be exploring for diamonds in the north part of Canada, so up in Nunavut specifically, and it was quite exciting. I enjoyed the work up there. We did find diamonds. We were working with Chuck Fipke, and we actually had some high-grade diamond-bearing dikes that we were working on just north of Rankin Inlet. Around the middle of the last decade, I got pretty concerned about the diamond market, and I was looking at global trends, and I thought it really looks like copper's going to run. Like copper's going to get a bid here. And I had worked previously in porphyry coppers with a company called Imperial Metals for several years. So I worked up at the Red Chris project. I worked at the Mount Poly project, both in British Columbia. I've drilled porphyries up in Alaska, down in Mexico. I've looked at them down in South America. So the commodity really appealed to me because I thought we were going to plug in on the right cycle. And then specifically, when I started looking at projects, I thought, why not leverage the experience that I had at Mount Poly, for instance, and look in this Quesnel belt of central British Columbia. And that's where I found this MPD project. I was talking to some friends in the mining industry who had contacts with Prospector and another group that had put together a group of claims, and that subsequently became MPD. So I convinced the board that copper was a good direction to move in out of diamonds, and convinced them that this project, which had seen quite a bit of historical work, like back to the 1960s, was just misunderstood geologically. And it was a little bit similar to the Great Bear story that way. You have decades of people working on a property, and then you come in with a different thesis. You use the experience that you've got to just recognize that there's untapped potential on the property if you do things differently. And indeed, with Kodiak, we had success right away trying these new ideas out.
As a journalist, I've been following copper about 25 years, and the supply chain story was in place 25 years ago. It's not a new selling point for copper, more or less, but what I've been hearing, and I've been on the road this year quite a bit. I just got back from Melbourne, Australia. Right now, everyone's talking about lithium, as you know, and the prediction is, and I don't doubt it, that the next flavor, but it won't be a flavor, it'll be a long time cycle, is copper. And I basically have 25 years as a journalist in the business, and I can't say that a lot of the deals that were in place 25 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago are still viable with the exception of just a few. So your timing at this point seems to be really, really good rather than starting with the copper project that long ago.
Well, Well, thanks, Ellis. My wife's an economist, so maybe I picked up a bit from her, but I do follow a sort of global market dynamics. It's not my training, but obviously we're all impacted by it when we're in the resource extraction space. So I was really looking at these sort of trends. And the first sort of push for electrification with vehicles, which was over 10 years ago, it really didn't go anywhere. But you could see at that point that the technology would work. And with the recent push and the recent sort of mass adoption, like we're going to have to mine more copper now over the next 20 years, say, than we have in kind of all of human history up to this point. Like the amount of copper, hundreds of pounds per electric vehicle, with all that electrification going on, ongoing development in the developing world, you're getting electrification and you're getting better living standards everywhere. It's just pretty obvious that we're going to need a lot more copper than we currently have. And there are no substitutes. People have tried making aluminum wiring. It's not like aluminum production is like a low impact environmental activity. So it's not really a good substitute that way. And of course, it doesn't work that well for safely conducting electricity. So we really don't have a choice. You want all these lithium powered technologies running around, you're going to need a lot of copper to support it. So where do you want to find the copper? Well, we see more and more, like the world is not more stable now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Like we're into this sort of balkanization and sort of different global spheres of influence. And you can see right now, and I'll tell you just with conversations that I've had out of major copper producers over the last year or two, people are looking for projects in North America, like specifically in the Americas. But really, if you can find something in Canada, that's seen as an ultimately a preferential destination. So that's why it was a good opportunity for Kodiak to go into central BC and not northern BC, not the Canadian Arctic. It's south central BC, right around a bunch of other copper mines. So you may as well go looking in areas where there's a good track record of past and current production.
I heard a number a while back that we need 500 new copper mines. To me, that seems like a big number. Is that even true?
Like, it's funny, right? Like, how many porphyries are there in the world? Well, there's a lot of porphyries. I won't lie. And there's a lot of porphyries that are sitting out there undeveloped at lower grades than what are currently being mined. But a lot of those are in terribly unpredictable political jurisdictions. So you had my preference. I would lean on projects that have the capacity to also generate higher grade copper. That's what I think adds to the economic flavor and viability of a lot of these things. But 500 mines, imagine the time it would take this day and age to permit 500 mines. That would be decades and decades and decades. So I would think that that's a pretty aggressive number, but certainly it's going to be a lot of additional production that's needed over the near term.
It seems like that production isn't there. So when are we going to see that supply crunch that will drive up the prices? They're doing okay, just under $4, but when are we going to see $6 or $7? And I'm not going to hold you to it. We're just chatting here.
It's hard for me to know. I started off my career in the environment. We put the Mount Poly mine back into production in 2005 when I was with Imperial Metals, learning about all these porphyry systems. That was copper at 50 cents a pound, right? So I haven't looked at spot today, but when you're in the high $3, low $4 a pound, and you're looking at the supply crunch, my guess is like people always say numbers like 10 years. It's always 10 years, right, that people project. But I would say within the next decade, just with the inflation rates that we're seeing right now, like persistent inflation, like if you didn't change the supply and demand dynamics and you just let inflation run its course at 5% or so per year, you would be looking at significantly higher prices at the end of a decade. So where are we going to get to that $6 or $7? I don't think it's going to be too far in the distant future.
I guess we can't really let that be a thing necessarily, although it will drive the market if that copper price does come up. In fact, it may be the only thing that drives the market is a significant uptick in the copper price. And I know that there are some projects around the world in jurisdictions that are friendly but hard to get to that are heavily funded by companies like Rio Tinto with grades of like 0.5%. You're a lot easier to access in a great jurisdiction. At what point are you going to potentially take on a major as a JV partner, if nothing else, just to advance the project, just to advance it significantly? You're doing okay now. You've got a 25,000 meter drill program in place. There's nothing tawdry about that at all. It's fantastic. But let's say you wanted to bring this project to a mine and stay involved. I know that your history is, at least with Great Bear, is developing a project to the point where you can get it taken out. What are the different variables that you're looking at here, if you don't mind me doing a little bit of a deep dive?
There's a lot of aspects to those questions, right? It's really a number of questions. You got to think about it strategically like the board of a company, right? Who's trying to generate value for their shareholders. So you're looking at trying to keep your dilution down to a minimum practical number. My experience with Great Bear is it would have been a complete tactical and strategic mistake with Great Bear to allow a strategic to basically have a joint venture on that property. It was one of the first things that we did on the Great Bear property was buy out Newmont's interest. They initially had a 33% interest on the property, and I had some board members and advisors arguing that we should keep them in at that level because it was easy for us to market based on having the involvement of a major. So that can give you a little bit of a boost in the short term, certainly at the beginning, but you pay the price. Your shareholders pay the price at the end of the day, because ultimately the competitive tension around a company that has that situation is way lower than it is when you have a clean slate. And I think Kodiak's in a good position in the sense that it has Teck invested as basically a 9.9% owner of the company. They've made sure every time we finance, they've kept that interest because honestly, they like what they've been seeing. You want to keep it, that's manageable in order to have sort of a minority interest, not having special privileges that relate to getting ROFRs or anything on the project like that. But they're a good shareholder. They provide good technical advice and they show the other shareholders that there is something here. I think once you get to the point of bringing in a major, there are times you can do that when you're doing a long-term project development, but I wouldn't think that that's currently the case with Kodiak. I think given the interest in projects in this area, I think there could be other opportunities that would be more attractive than bringing in a joint venture partner from a major at this stage.
Great answer, actually. I like it as an investor and also a journalist. It makes perfect sense to keep that dilution really, really low. You've got a very nice share structure. It's trading at a value that is less than what I paid when I came in about a year and a half ago. I see it as an opportunity at the moment. The market's depressed. The entire resource market is depressed right now. But again, it's an opportunity. When do you want to buy? Everyone else is when it's higher? Or do you want to come in now when everyone's floating away on their rafts out there on the Pacific Ocean, just enjoying the summer?
I was a pretty big participant in the last private placement. I like that exploration aspect of our industry, right? And I look at a project like Kodiak, and every time we go into a new area, we hit new stuff. We hit the gate zone when we started the project. Recently, we hit high-grade gold on surface in the Beyer Zone. And now we've got these targets that Antofagasta had this huge $50 million earn-in deal on just 5 or 6 years ago. It wasn't a long time ago. And they were drilling on the southern part of our project. It used to be called the Axe Project. Now it's all been integrated into MPD. But when I look at these things through the lens of all the porphyries that I've drilled, I think we got to apply the same techniques we used up at the gate zone. And that discovery is basically follow the rocks, listen to what they're telling you in terms of alteration, facies, and mineralization potential. Follow it, find the high grade stuff, and then suddenly you're looking at not a cluster of lower grade porphyries on surface, which is what people expected here. You're looking at that higher grade material, which can really unlock development potential and economic value on projects. Like that's what you want to see. Copper Mountain has those, has a lot of tonnage of low grade material. But why were they bought out recently? Why is Hud Bay now our neighbor? Copper Mountain operated independently for many years, and now it's been bought out, right? So this is the kind of thing we like to see. We like to see the majors getting heavily involved in the area. We like to see Newcrest getting involved up in northern BC, and now Newmont taking over their interests. We like to see Hud Bay down in our region. We like to see Teck operating in our region. So it's all these things together. I think what we need to do as a company with Kodiak is keep that exploration focus. We have 16 targets we're drilling this year. We've only drilled 3 so far, and they were all successful from kind of out of the park with Gate to finding more mineralization at something like Dillard, finding the high-grade gold at Beyer, and now we're down drilling at the West Zone down on the south part of the project. And I was just there 3 days ago, and it's very interesting. So I'm very happy with the way things have got started there too. That's what we need to keep the focus on. It's how you build value for the shareholders at this stage, is not getting caught up on development at too early a stage. You basically want to figure out where's the major mineralized center on my property right now. To be honest, I couldn't tell you. There's too many targets still, and they're all interesting as we go and drill them. So I think that's the kind of year we're looking forward to, is really using the same process we used up at Gate Zone, using that knowledge base. I was just sharing some of the logging techniques that I developed at Imperial Metals with our crew down there in Merritt. Well, like I said, 3 days ago. So let's use those techniques. Let's make those discoveries. And that's really what should be exciting for our shareholder base.
Well, Chris, I couldn't be happier that you decided to join us today. It's very nice to really get inside your head a little bit and see what your strategies and theologies, if you won't mind putting a little bit of a religious nature into this. I mean, we're all in this business because of the passion for the unknown and what's in the ground, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, theology is an interesting term. You have to have a belief system if you're going to work in this industry. Fortunately, like we can see with some of the stuff I've been fortunate to be involved with, it does work. Sometimes it does work. That's why we're all here.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me today on the program. I look forward to another chat real soon. You take care of yourself now. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Ellis.
I've been speaking with Chris Taylor, chairman of Kodiak Copper Corp, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange as KDK.V, and in the U.S. on the OTC as KDKCF. Find the company on their website, KodiakCopperCorp.com. I'm Ellis Martin.
Would you like to be one of the first to see who we are following? Subscribe to our audio newsletter. It's free. EllisMartinReport.com.